The anime starts by introducing us to Kunon Gurion, a completely blind kid who asks his parents what it means to be able to see. This sudden question takes them by surprise, and while they're in shock, Kunon mentions that everyone says that his eyes can't see, but he doesn't even know what it means to see. Kunon's mother stares at him in concern, but his father decides to speak up and explains that it's to be able to perceive colors and shapes. Despite this, Kunon clearly doesn't know what colors and shapes are, so he's still just as confused. His father reminds him that his eyes bear the hero's scar left by the holy knight Hister Huglia, and that's extraordinary, so he should be proud. Kunon simply accepts this with resignation, but he can't stop wondering why the maids always feel sorry for him just because he can't see. One day, a maid named Iko guides him through the manor to meet his new magic tutor. Kunon doesn't understand why he has to study magic, but Iko tells him it would be a waste not to, since he was born with a water crest, and being able to use magic is an amazing thing. Kunon reminds her that even if he could use it, he still can't go anywhere without someone's help, so he doesn't get the point. Even so, after a while walking through the house, he finally meets Ginny Course, who tells him that she'll be his magic tutor starting today. Just a few minutes into the class, Kunon grabs a magic wand and manages to cast a spell successfully. He doesn't know what kind of magic he's using though, so Ginny lets him know it's a water spell called Aori, which allows him to produce water using magic. She mentions that what he just created is about the size of an eyeball, and that immediately catches his interest. Ginny panics, thinking that she said something rude, and tries to explain that she thought an analogy might help him understand better. Kunon is just trying to process the size of his eyes and what he just created, and in no time, he comes to the conclusion that he might be able to create them. Just then, Kunon feels fully determined and decides that he will make his own eyes with magic. At lunch, he starts feeling the food he's eating with his hands, taking apart his sandwich just to inspect what's inside. Kunon never thought anything of it before, but now he can't help but be curious about what's in his sandwich. Everything feels intriguing now, and he wonders what the fresh grass-like thing in his mouth is. Iko informs him that it's called lettuce, and the thing on the loaf of bread is mustard. Kunon grabs something else from his plate, thinking that it's an apple, but Iko tells him that it's actually a plum. She notices how curious he is now, and mentions that it feels rewarding to cook now that he's interested in different foods. Kunon inspects a strawberry and tells her that he's now interested in what kind of food he's eating, but he's smelling too many scents. This clearly is because Iko prepared way too much food, but she keeps saying that it's truly been so rewarding to cook. Later that day, a lady named Flora meets Kunon to read him a book, as she always does. To her surprise, Kunon tells her that he'd like to hear the story of the holy knight Hister Huglia. Flora is a little taken aback by his request, but she reluctantly agrees after Iko reassures her. She asks Kunon to let her know if it becomes too much for him to hear, clearly worried about his well-being. Kunon reassures her, saying that he's thirsty for all kinds of knowledge right now. It is explained that a long time ago, there was a war between the heroes of the world and the demon lord. The hero of this nation, Hister Huglia, finally defeated the demon lord, but he lost an arm and a leg in the fierce battle. Since the war, every now and then the descendants of Hister are born with something missing, such as an arm, a leg, or eyesight. People have called such children reincarnations of the hero's scar. However, Kunon sees himself as his own person, and he recognizes his magical power as his own. During training, he manages to cast the Aori spell and multiplies the water droplets by 4. Kunon is completely determined, because using his power, he can cast magic, and with his magic, he will make eyeballs. He's decided to do it at any cost, but after casting that spell, he realizes how hard it truly is when his body suddenly collapses. Once he recovers, he understands that he needs way more knowledge and stamina, because they're necessary for strong magic. Iko reminds him that he's still 7 years old and doesn't eat much, but he'll definitely grow up eventually. Kunon tells her that that'll be too late, and passing out from using basic magic is out of the question. Iko explains that suddenly increasing his food intake will be bad for him, so they should do it in phases. Kunon agrees and says that he also wants to strengthen his muscles, but he's not good at running or walking. Iko then suggests sword practice, and since Kunon isn't against the idea, she tells him that she'll find him an accomplished teacher. Kunon stops her before she can leave to thank her for everything, and this makes Iko very happy, but she tells him that she would also love a raise. A few days later, Kunon is finally training with the sword, and Uro, his new tutor, instructs him to pay attention to the muscles of the arms and shoulders. He also tells him to swing down in the order of shoulders, elbows, then wrists, and Kunon follows all his instructions. Iko observes the class closely until she notices that Genier has arrived and lets Kunon know. Kunon pauses his training to greet her, and Uro tells him that it's already time for his next lesson. Once he leaves, Genier approaches Kunon and mentions the fact that he's begun learning swordplay. Kunon explains that it's because he needs knowledge and stamina to use magic. Genier is kind of surprised, noticing how much he has changed in only a few days. Iko quickly exchanges Kunon's sword with a wand, and Genier decides to review Aori from the last lesson. She doesn't expect much from him, but when Kunon casts multiple water spheres at once, she's left totally speechless. Genier can't understand how he's mastered this much on his own when she has only taught him a little, and it honestly makes her think that Kunon is truly frightening. In another scene, we see Princess Mirika Huglia at her manor, and her maid lets her know that her carriage is ready. Mirika only wonders if she really has to go, so the maid asks her if she hates the idea of visiting her fiancé that much. Mirika mentions that she's sure Kunon feels the same way, way, because he always looks gloomy. The maid reminds her that this is the king's decision, so Mirika has no choice but to go. Once in the carriage, Mirika starts thinking about Kunon, who was born with the hero's scar and is an important person to the kingdom of Huglia. She knows that this political marriage is part of her obligation as royalty, but she can't help but remember when they first met. She always tried to cheer him up, asking him what he liked and what he wanted to play. However, Kunon's only answer was nothing, because he can't do anything or go anywhere alone. Marika's expression turns sad as she remembers that, and she can't believe that she has to look at that gloomy face for the rest of her life. Much to her surprise, when she sees Kunon again, he greets her with a bright smile, more lively than ever. Mirika doesn't know how to react to that, and when she asks him what happened, Kunon tells her that he fell in love with magic. He decides to show her his Aori spell right there, creating a water sphere and taking it a step further by turning it into a small rainbow over her. Mirika is completely delighted by the sight, recognizing how impressive it is. Kunon apologizes for having made her tread lightly around him and asks her if she'll listen to his stories today, because he's done a lot of fun things lately. Mirika stares at him in surprise because she didn't know he could make a face like that. Without hesitation, she holds his hand and follows him, actually eager to hear his stories. By the end of the day, she returns home thinking about how fun her day with Kunon was, and she hopes she can see him again soon. In the meantime, Kunon also thinks about her after she leaves because he has never offered his hand to her before. Iko tells him that's because he's a true gentleman, and Kunon suddenly feels the need to learn how to behave around Mirika. That's why he decides to ask Flora, saying that he wants to be a gentleman who is worthy of Princess Mirika. Flora gladly agrees and tells him that they'll go over the poise and manners of a noble, but Iko interrupts her and asks her to make him a gentleman with a sense of humor. Meanwhile, we see Genie in the middle of her turmoil, wondering what to do after seeing Kunon's capacities with magic. Creating 7 beautiful water balls simultaneously is something even she can't do after all. He has literally perfected the elementary magic already, so he's learning way too fast, and there's nothing she can teach him anymore. Despite this, Genie decides to move on to the intermediate magic, but she immediately changes her mind. The person next to her room hears her desperate rambling and asks her to shut up, which makes her even more nervous. Genie tries to calm down, saying that this was supposed to be a sweet gig, getting paid handsomely to teach elementary magic to a kid. While magic is convenient, it's not necessarily safe, so it's too soon for a 7-year-old like Kunon to learn sophisticated magic. Even so, Genie suddenly grabs her pen and starts writing down, saying that it's too soon to give up. The person next door asks her to shut up again, clearly not happy about how loud she is being. Genie panics and apologizes again, but she continues writing, saying that she won't give up on this job since she has bills to pay. The next time she sees Kunon, she excitedly tells him that they'll try something different. Kunon tells her that he can accept anything she has to say after hearing it in her beautiful voice. It's clear he's trying his new charm after learning how to be a gentleman, and Genie notices that he's changed yet again. Leaving that aside, she explains that the Aori spell he's been using simply creates water, so they'll break down the magic involved. Kunon asks her if that means separating producing water, making water float, and maintaining the ball shape of the water. Genie praises him for his answer and tells him that they can break it down even further if they think about the temperature, viscosity, composition, color, shape, sheen, scent, and taste. She explains that there can be a wide variety of water and decides to show him by creating 2 water balls. Kunon touches each one of them and instantly notices that one is cold and the other one is warm. Genie confirms this and says that magical altercations add character to magic, which is what clearly defines and differentiates each sorcerer and their talents. Kunon understands that one becomes capable of altering fine details of magic, so the next time he casts the Aori spell, he manages to create water with flavor. Iko takes a sip of that water and mentions that it has apple flavor, but Kunon corrects her and says that it's actually plum. Genie almost instantly pales when she sees that Kunon immediately mastered the magic alteration she stayed up all night to come up with. She tries to keep her cool and mentions that it seems he can do them all, but Kunon tells her that it's actually a bit challenging. This takes her by surprise, but Kunon promises her that he will do them all eventually. That night, he stays up in bed, holding 2 apples, and thinks about the fact that he can tell the shapes and scents, but he doesn't know the colors. If he doesn't, he can't create magical alterations nor create eyeballs, so he has to get it done because he wants to see everything in this world. The next morning, Iko asks him what he would like to drink, and he tells her that he wants milk tea with no milk. She then asks him for some hot water, so Kunon casts Aori to create a hot water ball. Iko can't hide how impressed she is, and mentions that magic is truly a wonder, especially seen by someone with no magic, since it's like a divine miracle. Kunon moves the water ball around, and the moment it goes near the apples, he abruptly stands up in shock. Iko quickly catches the water with the teapot and asks him what's wrong, clearly worried about his sudden reaction. After a moment of stunned silence, Kunon tells her that he thinks he saw something. Iko immediately puts everything down and asks him if that's true, but Kunon tries to tell her that he doesn't know, and technically, he doesn't think he saw. Iko doesn't hesitate to pinch his cheeks, saying that she wanted him to be a gentleman with a sense of humor, but she doesn't want him to tell tasteless jokes. Kunon tries to stop her and explains that it feels like he saw colors, or more like he felt them with his magic. Once she finally lets go of him, he grabs grabs a green apple and asks her if it's red. Iko quickly calms down and tells him that it isn't red, so Kunon grabs a red apple and asks her again. Iko gives him the answer and understands that colors and their names don't correspond for him yet because he has never seen them before. Kunon is clearly confused about that now, so Iko explains that there are idioms with colors. She asks him if he can tell how many apples there are on the table, and Kunon tells her that he can tell there are 3 red apples and 2 green apples. Iko instantly praises him for giving the right answer, saying that this really is like a divine miracle, which is incredible. Without wasting any time, she immediately informs his father about it, saying that Kunon can now see colors. She clarifies that it is only in a small range, but he seems to be able to recognize colors now. The closer the item is, the clearer it is, and he can tell the color when he touches them. Kunon's father is clearly surprised by the news, and he asks her if that means he can read books now. Iko confirms this, saying that he can trace the ink to recognize the colors, and even though he hasn't learned letters yet, he's absorbed in picture books and encyclopedias. Once Kunon's father processes this information, he asks Iko to come back to the main house. She moved out since Kunon didn't want to be a bother for the others, and his wife had to tend to him non-stop, but now that could change. Iko informs him that Kunon is now trying to change drastically, and every day is a struggle. Changing his environment now might hinder Kunon from achieving his goals, so she doesn't think it's a good idea. Kunon's father quickly understands her logic, saying that she's right, and it is close enough that he can see him anytime he wants. He apologizes for putting her in a position to take care of Kunon all by herself, but Iko assures him it is totally fine because she loves working for money. Kunon's father smiles, saying that her cheerfulness might have a positive effect on his son. Iko takes the opportunity to say that rather than a compliment, she would love a raise instead, but Kunon's father only laughs at that, making his answer very clear. Sometime after that, Iko sees Kunon experimenting with magic once again, and he explains that Jinie will be here soon, so he would like to surprise her. Iko encourages him to go all out, so Kunon casts Aori, creating a huge red water ball above them. Iko praises him and says that it's a beautiful color, like the eyes of a white rabbit. Kunon is just as excited as her, and mentions that when he makes the water balls bigger, he can sense the color more strongly. He tries to admire the color he's sensing right now, but just then, his parents and brother arrive. His mother tells him that she heard the news and knows that he can see colors now. Kunon smiles and recognizes her voice right away, knowing that it's his dear mother. His sudden excitement makes him lose focus, so the huge water ball he was keeping up in the air suddenly falls on both him and Iko. After a moment of silence, Kunon completely ignores what just happened and calls his mother, covered in that bloody red color. This terrifying sight makes his mother scream in horror, and before she can understand anything, she passes out in her son's arms. Kunon's father instantly rages, asking him how he could do such a horrific thing. Kunon doesn't understand what the problem is, so Iko gladly informs him that red is also the color of human blood. Kunon's mother manages to stand back up, but her husband is still freaking out, so he tells Kunon that, as a punishment, he'll have no allowance for 2 months, and Iko's pay will be cut for 3 months. Kunon apologizes and accepts his punishment, but Iko immediately passes out when she hears that. On the other hand, Jinie observes everything in the distance, and confirms once again how frightening Kunon is, which makes her wonder how far he will go, climbing the ladder. For a moment, she thinks that he may be able to earn the title of highest honor in this world, Cerulean Sorcerer. Sometime after that, Kunon's father decides to speak to his first son, Ixio, and tells him that he's thinking about sending Kunon to the school for noble children. He knows he's never been outside of the mansion except for a handful of times since birth, and he'll be scared of strangers in the outside world, but that's why he's counting on him. Ixio hesitates for a moment because all he can remember is the time he wanted to play with his little brother, but Kunon tripped down the stairs and let go of his hand. Despite the guilt he feels at that memory, Ixio looks at his father with determination and tells him that he'll do it and he'll protect Kunon at any cost. In another scene, we see Kunon calmly reading a book, tracing the words with his finger. Iko asks him what he's reading about, and he tells her that he's reading about hydromancy. Kunon explains that he can fill a container processed with supernatural powers with water and tell fortunes or look for missing items. Iko instantly gets excited and asks him if he can look for her first flush of youth and its brilliance that she's lost. Kunon reassures her, saying that she's young and right in the middle of the bloom of youth. Iko then asks him if he can use hydromancy to find her groom-to-be, but Kunon just tells her that she's a fine woman, so men will be all over her. He also mentions that if he wasn't the second son of the Marquis, he would take her as his bride. As they joke around non-stop, Flora simply observes them with an awkward smile, wondering how they can be so cheerful. Once her lessons start, Kunon gives her the right answers, but Flora is still worried about him. She's given Kunon lectures and taught him manners as a noble gentleman, but Iko's idea of making him a gentleman with a sense of humor makes her question if she was right. A jolly man can be attractive, and that suits Kunon better, even though he may be seen as a bit shallow, but she still has her doubts. Kunon sees her lost in her thoughts and asks her what's making her look so concerned. Before she can answer, he decides to make a toast with his cup of tea, simply for looking at her. This makes Flora confirm her suspicions about him being quite shallow, but even so, compared to when she met him, she can admit that he's become a lot more adorable. Kunon gets a whiff of his cup of tea and says that it's the 12-year vintage from the New Kingdom, which is worthy of a woman as beautiful as her. Iko corrects him, informing informing him that it's actually domestic tea from Huglia, but this only makes him laugh. Flora simply observes their interactions with an awkward smile, not really knowing how to react. At night, Iko decides to guide Kunon back home, saying that Lord Gurion is waiting for him. A strong, cold wind makes her shiver in their way back, so she asks Kunon if he can do something about it. Kunon then casts Aori, creating 2 water balls with hot water to keep them warm. Iko hugs one of the water balls, enjoying how warm and squishy it is, and saying that it feels really nice to the touch. Kunon tells her that he encased water with a super soft and stretchy membrane, but it's still just a prototype. Iko says that she wants a bed of it to sleep in, and he admits that he's thinking that too. Leaving that aside, he wonders what his father would like to speak to him about, wanting to know if he did something wrong. Iko tells him that she doesn't think he's done anything to get yelled at, because he's learned his lesson from the Sea of Blood incident. Once they finally reach the manor, they're welcomed by the butler, Balin, and Kunon's older brother. Ixio walks with him through the house, and asks him if he needs him to lead him by the hand. Kunon reassures him, and explains that he's fine, because he can now sense what's around him pretty well thanks to his magic. Ixio quickly accepts this, but when he looks at Kunon, he can't help but remember the sad expression he used to have when he couldn't walk around on his own. Kunon somehow senses his gaze on him, so he asks him if anything's wrong, but Ixio simply smiles and tells him that he's glad he's doing great. After a while walking, they finally meet with their parents, who have something important to tell them. Lord Gurion tells Kunon that Flora told them he finished what they cover at the school for noble children, but he isn't interested in going to the actual school. Kunon confirms that, saying that he would hate to trouble those around him, and he has something he wants to prioritize over school. His father tells him that he's always believed he should do what his heart desires, but noble children are obligated to go to school. On paper, he is enrolled in the school for noble children, but his circumstances are special, so they have permission from the king for schooling to be optional. Kunon suddenly pauses, saying that he smells nepotism, but his father tells him that he doesn't appreciate that phrasing, and that's beside the point, so he would like him to give it some thought. Kunon asks him if he's talking about how to use his allowance, because he always complains about the way he uses it. It may seem like a waste of money to him, but he thinks he's spending it responsibly. His father tries to tell him that he's not talking about his allowance, but Kunon continues, thanking him for always working hard to provide for the family. His father asks him to leave that aside, and Kunon asks him if he's still mad at him then, for turning his garden into a sea of blood. Gurion completely loses it, raising his voice to say that that was unacceptable, and next time, he'll have no allowance for 6 months. His wife tries to make him calm down, and reminds him that they're not here to talk about that today. Once he finally calms down, Gurion clarifies that he's just asking him to think about Princess Marika. After all, those who do not fulfill their noble obligations are at a disadvantage in high society. That means that, because of him, Marika might be viewed in a negative light in the future. Kunon quickly understands the situation, and that's all it takes for him to accept. He tells his father that he's going to school, even though he thinks it's a hassle. Gurion clarifies that he's not asking him to go for years, since he just needs to take the advancement exams. Once he passes them, he will receive the official certificate of graduation, and since there are 5 exams, he only needs to go to school 5 times. Kunon is relieved to hear it's that easy, and Ixion tells him that Marika and he will graduate after the next exam, so he'll be taking it with them. Without wasting any time, Kunon's mother tells him that they have to get him ready for school, and he will need clothes, shoes, and a nice coat. She has to get his measurements, so she tells Iko that she needs her help. After they leave to get that done, Gurion warns Ixio that there are other royals at school, and they may try to approach Kunon and Marika. Ixio reassures him, saying that he will be with them to avoid any problems. Soon enough, Kunon informs Marika that he's going to school, and she's clearly very happy to hear the news. He clarifies that he'll only go for the advancement exams, but she tells him that it's wonderful, because she'll get to spend time with him at school. Kunon confesses that he doesn't really know what to expect at school, but Marika reassures him, saying that she will escort him as his elder. Kunon accepts her proposal, but he also mentions that he's worried, because if she's with him, then all the boys who are in love with her will be jealous of him. Marika nervously tells him that she's certain it will be fine, so Kunon asks her if she's not popular. That clearly offends her, so she reminds him that she's a princess, so it's clear that she's popular, and there are as many boys who like her as the number of fingers on her right hand. That makes it 5, so Kunon starts thinking about getting a new cane for self-defense. Once the day finally comes, Kunon wears a dashing attire, using a mask to cover his eyes, and a new cane for self-defense. Iko is completely excited about his new looks, saying that he looks like the model for the classic storybook prince. Kunon plays along with his charms, which makes Ixio wonder if his little brother was always this shallow. Once they get in the carriage, Kunon says goodbye to his family and casts Aori to evenly surround the wheels with water. When the carriage starts moving, Ixio is surprised to notice that it doesn't shake at all. Kunon tells him that a rough carriage is bad for their back, so he used Aori to avoid that. Ixio mentions that magic is really convenient, and Kunon agrees, saying that since it's so versatile, even he may be able to find a job in the future. After a while, Ixio says that he's sure he's nervous to travel far away from the house, but Kunon disagrees, and tells him that he's grown a bit stronger. He knows that he's worried him a lot as well, because when he fell and hurt himself, he blamed himself for that. Ixio is a little surprised that he knew that, but Kunon assures him that he's alright now. He used to wish he could just disappear, but now he's determined to survive no matter what. Ixio can't help but smile at that, realizing that his little brother truly has changed since learning magic. Kunon tells him that he has a drive that he wants to prevail even if the rest of the world perishes, so he will live. That completely takes Ixio off guard and confuses him deeply, but Kunon continues speaking, saying that he'll outlive everyone so thoroughly that he feels bad for the whole human race. Ixio simply agrees and smiles awkwardly, questioning if he really is his little brother. That aside, he's a little surprised when Kunon manages to sense that they're almost at school, because he can sense a lot of people. Once they're finally there, Mirika excitedly runs to greet them, and Kunon doesn't hesitate to use his charms. Ixio simply observes their interaction in silence, wondering what's up with these two. Mirika decides that it's time for them to go already, but she looks concerned when Kunon doesn't follow her. Kunon doesn't move from his spot, focused on the many voices he's hearing right now. The presence of countless people and endless voices are overwhelming, and he knows that his past self would have recoiled from this. However, he simply smiles and holds his hand out to Mirika, asking her if he can become a girl just for now. Mirika plays along without questioning him, taking his hand and saying that she'll become a boy then. Ixio decides not to question them anymore at this point, despite how confused he is. In the meantime, Cast, a professor of the school, is seemingly waiting for Kunon's arrival, and she's clearly worried about it too. He's the second son of the Marquis, with the hero's scar, and she's heard rumors that he's a shy boy. She can't help but worry, wondering if a novice teacher like her can handle the job of showing him around. Her thoughts are interrupted when she hears some girls talking about a boy so charming like a prince. That's when she sees Kunon for the first time, being escorted by Mirika and his older brother. When they walk past her, she quickly snaps out of it and says his name, stopping him before he can leave. Cass tells him that she's a professor at this school, and she'll be his guide today. Kunon decides to introduce himself properly, but confuses her when he says that he's a girl right now. Cast is clearly lost, so Kunon explains that he's biologically a boy, with a personality of a boy, but today, he's a beautiful day. That statement does nothing to clear her confusion, but before she can question him any further, the bell rings, and Mirika and Ixio have to go. Cast says goodbye with a smile, but when she's left alone with Kunon, she has the feeling that this will be a lot of work. Mirika says goodbye to Kunon, and a group of students observes this from one of the classrooms, mentioning that he is the hero's scar. One of them says that he heard he received blessings from the king as the first hero's scar born in 100 years. Prince Lyle immediately makes a face when he hears that, so his classmates quickly clarify that Kunon doesn't look like a big deal, and the hero's scar might be just an unfounded superstition. Despite their attempts to fix the situation, when Lyle sees Mirika smiling at Kunon, he's clearly angrier than before. Soon after that, Cass takes Kunon to a classroom and asks him if he heard the overview of the advancement exams. Kunon confirms this, saying that he was told that if he passes 5 exams, he can receive the certificate of graduation. Cass explains that normally, after taking an exam, there will be a period of time to prepare for the next. As an exception, his exams will be held in a shorter period, since she's received orders from his father and the king to do so. Kunon pauses, and with a serious expression, he tells her that his father and the king are besties, so this is nepotism, and he wants to apologize for pressuring the school to do this. Cass clearly wasn't expecting that, so she simply says that she's going to pretend she didn't hear that. However, Kunon continues speaking, saying that he heard these things happen all the time in high society. Cass doesn't say anything and places the exam sheets on his desk, telling him that he's free to tell her if anything is unclear. Kunon continues, saying that his father and the king are as thick as thieves. Cass nervously tries to ignore his comments and asks him not to involve her in a political mess. Kunon keeps pushing and says that this relationship has been going on since the previous generation, but Cass immediately interrupts him and asks him to start the exam. After the bell rings, Cass goes to the teacher's room to check his answers in the exam. She never expected Kunon to continue chit-chatting for the whole exam, and she surely expected him to fail because of that, but he actually got everything right in all the subjects, which doesn't make sense to her. In the meantime, Kunon starts feeling hungry, so he decides to go to the cafeteria with Mirika. However, they suddenly run into Prince Lyle and his classmates, and Mirika almost instantly shrinks in place. Everyone near the place goes silent, and the air quickly fills with tension, which makes Kunon wonder what's happening. Lyle mocks Kunon and asks if a brat like him really received blessings from his father. Mirika tries to defend Kunon from her older brother, but Lyle asks her to stay out of it. Kunon's grip on his cane tightens, and he says that he doesn't care who it is, but if he agonizes Mirika and gets in their way, he can't ignore it. His threat suddenly gets interrupted by Ixio, who stands between them and nervously asks Lyle if he wants something with his little brother. Lyle is clearly not happy about his intervention, so he complains about how disrespectful this is, since he didn't give him permission to speak. Ixio hesitates nervously, and he can't believe that his little brother and Mirika were approached by royalty on the first day. He doesn't understand anything, and he clearly doesn't know what to do, but Kunon decides to do something first and silently casts Aori. With his magic, he gathers all the water he can find at the cafeteria without anyone noticing and uses it to soak Lyle's pants. Ixio nervously reminds him that status is supposed to be irrelevant at school, so they should smooth things over. Lyle clearly doesn't agree with him, but Kunon interrupts them to say that the prince wet himself. Only then, Lyle looks down at his soaked pants, and everyone starts whispering things. Lyle instantly feels embarrassed embarrassed and tries to deny it, not understanding what just happened. On the other hand, Ixio already has an idea of what happened, and he knows Kunon is involved. Feeling exposed and humiliated, Lyle decides to run away, and his classmates follow him. Kunon just smiles victoriously, saying that a nuisance is gone now. He easily leaves that aside to speak about what he'll have for lunch, and mentions that he wants a hamburger. Ixio immediately stops him to address the elephant in the room, asking him if he did that to the prince. Kunon completely ignores his question with a smile, and asks Marika what she'll have for lunch. Marika knows better than to question him, so she decides to simply sit with them at lunch. Once they get their food, Kunon finally asks about Lyle, and Marika informs him that he's her brother, 6th Prince Lyle Huglia. Kunon is shocked to know that they're siblings, because he thought there can't be a big brother who doesn't cherish his little siblings. Marika tells him that she wishes that were true, but it clearly isn't, and Ixio confirms this. Kunon then tells Ixio that he's glad he's his big brother, and once again, Ixio realizes that his little brother really has changed. However, they also acted so out of line to someone so untouchable, so he doesn't know how he should report this to his father. Kunon simply enjoys his food without worrying about anything, so Marika laughs and says that rambling about it is not going to change a thing. Her reassurance does nothing to ease Ixio's worries, so he just hopes they can graduate without any further incident. Kunon asks Marika why Lyle stood in front of them in such a wild manner without trying to hide his ferocious violence. Ixio asks him not to say it like he encountered a monster, but Marika ignores that and explains that it was probably to keep her in check. After all, Lyle is the 6th prince, and she's the 9th princess, so she's below him in the royal hierarchy. However, she's engaged to Kunon, the hero's scar and a sorcerer, so her status is rapidly rising. Now that Kunon has made his debut into society, from now on, their status will be above Lyle in high society. Kunon mentions that it sounds complicated, but Marika smiles reassuringly and tells him that with or without her father's order and their status in high society, she's happy to be betrothed to him. Kunon agrees, saying that the next time he meets with the king, he might kneel in gratitude. For now, he'd like to go apologize to Prince Lyle, but both Ixio and Marika ask him not to do that. Time goes by rather quickly, and the day of the final exam finally arrives, so Kunon decides to train his magic in the morning. Genier asks him to try changing the sensation for today's Aori alteration, so the first thing Kunon does is turning a water ball into ice. However, when Genier holds it in her hand, she says that it feels like an apple, so she asks him to try touching other things and expressing their sensation. Kunon takes that as a task, and when he goes to school, he tries touching different things, including a horse. Ixio asks him what he's working on now, and Kunon explains that he's collecting samples for alterations. Of course, Ixio has no idea what he's talking about, but he doesn't question him any further. Marika runs to them to greet them, and Kunon instantly kneels before her, saying that he's sad that today's his last day to hear her voice at school. She reminds him that school ends in the evening, so Kunon tells her that he's not sad anymore. That simply makes her laugh, and Ixio still doesn't understand any of them, but he knows that they're completely something else. Once in school, Cast informs Kunon that he will take the final exam with the other students. Now Kunon feels like he's in an actual school, unlike before, but he says that it's a shame that he's no longer in a special room with Professor Cast. Cast lets him know that she's watching him, even if they have many other students, so she wishes him the best of luck. Ixio mentions that they seem very close now, and Kunon explains that they talked a lot during the exams. She told him about how she became a teacher, following a man she was in love with to the senior school for nobles. However, he failed the test, and only she became a teacher, so she's now on her 2nd year. Cast doesn't deny the story, saying that she was young, and she currently doesn't know what she's doing. Both Ixio and Marika smile awkwardly, not knowing how to react after hearing that, and wondering why a teacher would discuss that with a child during the exam no less. Before they can say anything, a group of students approaches them and ask Marika to introduce her fiancé to them. Even though he's a little surprised at first, Kunon decides to introduce himself, saying that he's engaged to Princess Marika Huglia and he's Ixio Gurion's little brother. He confesses that he's actually relieved now because he was starting to wonder if Marika and his brother had no friends, because no one would approach and talk to them. Clearly embarrassed, Marika explains that it was because she asked them to leave them alone, since this was a rare opportunity for her to enjoy her school life with him. Kunon quickly understands and tells her that he appreciates her thoughtfulness. However, he clarifies that it is true that he was worried, but it would have been rude to ask if they didn't have any friends, or if they were usually always alone. Now he's glad to know that his brother isn't lonely, and he's really glad that Marika has friends. And he's so happy that he didn't have to console them by reminding them of his situation and saying that it is fine not to have friends. Everyone goes silent at that, but Marika smiles and says that he totally is fine not having friends. Kunon quickly agrees, saying that humans do surprisingly okay being alone. In another scene, we see Lyle stubbornly staring out the window, and his classmates inform him that it's time for the exam. Lyle simply tells them that professors can wait, but his friends remind him that the final exam will be conducted all at once, so even the prince isn't allowed to be late. Once the bell rings, Cast asks everyone to take their seats, and Marika decides to sit next to Kunon. However, Lyle suddenly stands between them, and he's clearly pissed off. Even though he hasn't said a word yet, all the students in the classroom start whispering things, and Ixio remembers the rumors he heard from the maid maids who said that the prince caused trouble at school before. Apparently, imperial studies couldn't be extended to the 6th prince. Lyle has also heard a lot of things about himself, but since he's still a prince, no one says anything to his face, and they talk behind his back all the time. That's why he's angry all the time, because the people at the castle and at this school are all the same. His thoughts are suddenly interrupted when Kunon holds his hands, saying that it is nice to meet him. Kunon excitedly introduces himself as Marika's fiancé and tells him that he's really happy to get a chance to say hi, since he didn't really get to the other day. Lyle gets a little freaked out and asks what's wrong with him, but Kunon continues shaking his hand and explains that he's his future brother-in-law. Lyle tries to pull away and asks him to stop messing with him, but Kunon's grip is strong and he doesn't let go. That's why Lyle harshly reminds him that he never gave him permission to speak or to hold his hand. Kunon simply smiles and ignores his warning, saying that he has a really manly voice, and he can tell from the feel of his hand that his face must also be manly. Without hesitation, Kunon tells him that if his eyes could see, he would have stared a hole through his manly face already. That comment takes Lyle off guard, making him feel flustered and nervous. Not knowing how to react, Lyle asks his sister what's wrong with Kunon, but Marika simply laughs, saying that she never knew that he could get flustered and blush like that. Lyle quickly denies that he's blushing and tells Kunon that he needs to let go already. Kunon finally releases him and says that he's glad that he understands now, and this time, Lyle has nothing to say to him. Ixio sighs in relief, and Cast asks everyone to take their seats once again, because the final exam is about to start. Later that day, Cast informs them that she'll announce those who pass the final exam. All the students observe her patiently as she draws a big flower on the board and tells them that they all passed. Everyone cheers, and Ixio approaches his little brother to tell him that he's glad he passed. Mirika smiles and tells him that they're graduating together, so Kunon congratulates her as well. Soon after that, Kunon says goodbye to Mirika and the other students, saying that he hopes that their paths will cross again. Cast smiles, thinking to herself that he was a bit quirky, but a bright, wonderful student. As they leave, Kunon asks her to think about dating his older brother if she's still looking for a boyfriend, because that way they will see each other again in no time. Ixio asks him to stop that, and Cast realizes that she's said a little too much, and she's had her heart broken by a graduate for no reason. Meanwhile, Lyle observes Kunon leave from inside the school, but instead of his always angry expression, he's finally smiling for once. When Kunon returns home, he continues his class with Jeunie, who asks him to use Aori to create a whirlpool. Kunon follows her instructions and easily gets it right in no time, so Jeunie asks him to make a sudden stop and split it into 10. Once he does that, she quickly instructs him to turn them red, blue, and green, and to change the texture afterward. Kunon manages to do all that she instructs, and Jeunie praises him for his good work. However, before she can end the class, Kunon tells her that he's made alterations by adding shape and temperature to the texture. To demonstrate this, he uses Aori to create a real-looking bird that leaves the place flying. Jeunie falls on her knees from the shock, knowing that it's over for good now. Once she calms down, Jeunie tells him that his graduation gives her a perfect opportunity to tell him the truth. Kunon doesn't know what she's talking about, so she asks him to mentally prepare himself because she's going to reveal a shocking truth now. Iko decides to leave them alone, and Jeunie finally reveals the truth to him, but she clearly wasn't expecting his reaction. Kunon dramatically tells her that he can't believe that she's actually the goddess of the night sky, and that she must return to the world of gods soon. Jeunie smiles and tells him that she personally loves that story, but that's not the case at all. She confesses that the truth is that there is nothing she can teach him anymore. It's actually been quite a while that she's had nothing else to teach him, and she's taught him everything she could in the range of elementary magic with no attacking ability. Now he's using magic better than she is, so once he learns new magic, he will surpass her in no time. Kunon suddenly stands up and tells her that that's not true, because he loved the little magic tricks she's come up with, trying to deceive him with every possible method. Just then, Jeunie realizes that he was actually aware that she was desperate, and that makes things easier. Kunon confirms this, saying that her tricks out of desperation definitely broadened his range of magic. She's the one who gave him a purpose in life, the day he realized that he could try to create his own eyes with magic. It was her little tricks that taught him the depths of magic as well. Jeunie keeps a smile on her face, but she tells him that if he truly feels that way, then he should stop calling them little tricks. She also explains that she had to rack her brain to squeeze them out, and there were many times she struggled to come up with one. Kunon doesn't believe her and asks her if the problem is her salary, assuming that she wants to quit because the pay is low. Jeunie loses her patience and snaps, telling him that it's the opposite, because it's unbearable to get paid so much when she has no job to fulfill, and she has hit her limit now. Jeunie tries to calm down and places her hands on his shoulders to make him listen for once. She tells him that he should have an exceptional sorcerer who's much better than her as his teacher, because she can't help him improve any further. She's managed to make it work with his lessons, but it's over now, so she can't guide him anymore. Kunon tells her that even if they're little tricks, if she can think up so many of them, then it's a respectable talent, so he wants her to deceive him more, because he wants her to be his teacher. Kunon insists, asking her to make it work, but despite how hard he tries, Jeunie tells him that she can't do it anymore. After all, his magic is far more advanced than hers now. Despite that, Kunon tells her that he really likes her little tricks, but Jeunie once again asks him to stop calling them that if he truly likes them. In the end, Jeunie leaves the mansion, knowing knowing that Kunon is an unmistakable genius, so maybe he has what it takes to become the cerulean sorcerer. Even Kunon, with God-given talents, went through endless trial and error and challenged himself to overcome it all. That's why she knows that she can't lose to her pupil, because it's not too late for her either. Later that day, Kunon finds out that Flora has also resigned because he finished his curriculum and officially graduated from the school for noble children. He's a little disappointed that he didn't say goodbye, but Iko explains that Flora said that she wouldn't be able to hold back tears to say goodbye in person. Kunon says that he'll have to write a letter of thanks in that case, and Iko tells him that Flora would love that. She also tells him that while he's at it, he could ask if there's a male servant who's between 18 and 25 years old, well-paid, tall, and good-looking in her manner. Kunon already knows that she's talking about her groom-to-be, so he asks her if she would leave him and get married. Iko wipes a fake tear from her face and tells him that it pains her to be parted from him, but she'd like to get married. She also knows that he'll be perfectly fine on his own now, so there's nothing to worry about. Kunon tells her that he won't be perfectly fine because everyone is leaving him now, and there's an old wives' tale that a bunny dies when it feels too lonely. Iko has actual tears in her eyes now, and Kunon stubbornly tells her that he won't ask about a male servant who's between 18 and 25 years old, well-paid, and good-looking. That night, while they're having dinner as a family, Kunon informs his father about Geni's decision and mentions that she told him to find an exceptional sorcerer for his teacher. Ixio tells him that he heard a rumor at school that there's an extraordinary royal sorcerer. His father tries to stop him from speaking any further, but Ixio mentions that girls especially were making a fuss about that sorcerer, though he doesn't remember the name. His mother asks him if they were perhaps talking about Xionli Finrol, and Ixio confirms it, saying that he's apparently a sorcerer of immense power and beauty. Kunon doesn't need to hear anything else, and says that he'd like him to be his new teacher. However, his father, Arsene, suddenly snaps, asking him to hold on. Everyone at the table goes quiet, and he explains that it is impossible to invite a royal sorcerer here. Kunon asks him if it really is impossible, even for him, who's favored by and collusively connected with the king. Arsene doesn't know who's feeding him these things, though he assumes it is most likely Iko. He explains that royal sorcerer also refers to a title within the royal court, so other than the king and those under his chain of command, no one can give orders to them. They rarely leave the castle, and outside of royalty, getting in touch with them is also severely restricted. Kunon quickly understands that meeting with them is difficult, let alone inviting him here. His father confirms that and thinks that the conversation is finally over, but after a few seconds of thinking, Kunon tells him that he could accompany him when he visits the castle, in that case, by some means or another, and when he gets lost, the royal sorcerers who happen to be there will help him, and by some means or another, he'll become their apprentice. His father simply asks him how he can present such a vague, flawed plan so confidently. Kunon assures him that it is actually an elaborate plan with 90% success rate, but his father tells him that the success rate is less than 10%. He also would never use something like by some means or another in an elaborate plan, and definitely not twice. Kunon's expression turns sad at that, because he really thought that his plan was perfect. He asks her mother for reassurance, and seeing his adorable face, she can't help but agree, saying that Kunon is perfect. Ixio knows that his mother is indulging Kunon, but he doesn't say anything about it. Kunon's mother uses her charms and asks her husband if he can do something, because Kunon is practically begging him. Arsene definitely can't resist her charms, so he finally gives in, saying that he will at least ask the king next the time he sees him. Ixio knows that his father is now indulging his mother, but he decides to remain silent. Kunon, on the other hand, happily thanks his father, clearly satisfied with the result. His father asks him not to get his hopes up anyway, but he reassures his wife and tells her that he'll make it happen. In another scene, we see Marika's older sister bringing a document about Kunon to the Grand Master. He mentions that an apprentice-level sorcerer asking to study a royal sorcerer is unheard of, even for a noble close to the king. The princess tells him that power and status mean nothing to royal sorcerers, but her little sister, Marika, is head over heels for this tiny sorcerer named Kunon. Having that in mind, and reading the document in his hands, the Grand Master gives it some thought. He suddenly stands up from his seat in surprise, and his eyes light up when he realizes that they are actually talking about Kunon Gurion, the hero's scar. Soon enough, Kunon and his father head to the palace after receiving permission to meet him alone, which was a surprise for both of them. His father clarifies that if things go well, the king will consider the request for a magic tutor. Kunon excitedly says that it's an impressive power of collusion, but Arsene sighs and clarifies that that's not what this is. He informs him that the royal sorcerers apparently took an interest in him, and that's why they received this permission. That aside, his father asks him what kind of magic he learned recently, and Kunon uses his Aori spell to create a real-looking cat. His father gets really excited about the cat, and Kunon tells him that initially it was transparent, but now he can even do white or calico. Arsene can't believe that this cute cat is truly just water, and he thinks that magic sure is a wonder. Kunon tells him that some motions are still unnatural, but he wants to study more, and is hoping to reproduce the sounds they make. His father doesn't respond this time, because he's too engrossed in petting the cat. Kunon asks him if he likes cats that much, and even though Arsene tries to deny it, he asks him why he doesn't have a real cat. His father immediately refuses, saying that if something like this was at home, he'd never get any any work done. Kunon tells him that if he leverages the wealth and power of the Guryons, he's sure he can collect cute cats from all over the world. His father stands firm on his decision, saying that they will not keep any cats or animals in their household because they can't have them running around his feet and making him trip. Kunon knows that his father just cares about his safety, but he assures him that he doesn't need to worry about him anymore. Arson also mentions that his wife prefers dogs, and Kunon understands that he's thinking of their family. He thanks him for the information and asks him what he thinks about keeping cats outside. After all, Iko told him that keeping cats outside is a sign of a certain status among nobles, and apparently bringing them inside is considered crude. His father is left a little confused at that, and he now wonders if Iko was actually talking about cats. Kunon clarifies that Mirika agreed, so they clearly were really talking about cats. His father thinks about it for a moment, and he starts thinking that it may not be a bad idea. Once they finally arrive at the castle, Mirika's older sister, Reisha Huglia, welcomes them. Arson is still holding the cat Kunon created, and he thanks her for coming to greet them. Kunon immediately uses his charms to introduce himself, saying that he's honored to meet her. His father quickly informs him that Reisha is the second princess, so he must greet her properly. Kunon gets even more excited, realizing that she's his future sister-in-law, so he's really happy to see her. Reisha properly introduces herself, and mentions that Mirika has told her a lot about him. After the introductions, Reisha addresses the fact that they brought a cat, because she thinks it's adorable. Arson carefully puts the cat down, and Kunon turns it into its original form, so all that's left is a puddle of water. Reisha is really surprised by this, though his father is heartbroken because he didn't even get to name the cat. Kunon informs her that it was magic, and just then, Reisha realizes that he's more skilled than she's heard. Arson is still feeling sad for his loss, but Reisha informs him that she'll take Kunon to the Black Tower. He quickly recovers his composure and thanks her, mentioning that he will have an audience with the king. Kunon tells him that he can get home by himself because he wants to see Mirika too. His father says that he'll arrange a carriage for him in that case, so he can enjoy his time. Kunon thanks him and clarifies that he actually reserved an auspicious restaurant, the one where his father managed to win his mother over. Arson gets a little embarrassed and asks him to go already, so Kunon quickly follows the second princess. While they're walking, Reisha tells him that the Black Tower is on the other side of the castle and asks him if he's comfortable walking. Kunon tells her that he's perfectly fine and asks her if she'll tell him about the essence of sorcerers while they walk. Reisha denies it, saying that she's still new, so there's not a lot she can say about that. Kunon excitedly asks her if she'll talk about a new interpretation of compound magic then, or the way to apply the old interpretation to the new one, or perhaps the new theory on three-dimensional and oblique magic circles. Reisha quickly stops him, saying that she can't have such high-level conversations while walking. Once Kunon finally calms down, Reisha mentions that he surely heard from Mirika that there are 7 princes and 10 princesses. The throne goes to the first prince in most countries, but in Huglia, they lean toward meritocracy, which means that, depending on achievement, the birth order can be overturned. Kunon mentions that he's heard it's complicated, and Reisha affirms it, but clarifies that she relinquished her right to the throne to be a sorcerer. As they talk, Kunon suddenly stops in his tracks and looks out the window, sensing a lot of magical powers coming from that direction. Reisha continues speaking, saying that Mirika is concerned that he might get dragged into the issue of royal succession. She immediately stops talking when Kunon simply slides past her using some sort of magic. Reisha asks him what he's doing, and Kunon explains that he created a very thin layer of water on his shoes and froze it, so it's like an ice sleigh, which is faster than walking. Reisha clearly wants to try that, but before they do anything, she tells him that he shouldn't affiliate with a faction carelessly, and he must not sign or say anything that can be used against him. Once that's clear, Reisha excitedly asks him to let her skate too, and Kunon gladly creates that very thin layer of ice on her shoes as well. Soon enough, they're both skating through the halls of the castle, while Kunon guides her and says that the trick is to float just a little. Even though they're having a lot of fun skating around, all the personnel of the castle get concerned. The guards soon start chasing after the second princess, saying that it's dangerous for her to do that. Despite their efforts, they give up midway after running out of breath, and that's when a knight named Dario comes out to ask them what's going on. Once he finds out, Dario immediately chases after them and asks them to stop. Kunon hesitates for a moment, but Reisha is still having fun, so she just asks him to go faster. Unfortunately, Dario is clearly way faster than the guards, so he manages to catch them in no time. Both Reisha and Kunon have no choice but to apologize for what they did, like two little kids after being scolded. Somewhere else in the castle, Arson is peacefully enjoying some tea, wondering what the commotion is. The butler informs him that a child sorcerer made mischief and got caught by a knight, and that makes Arson spit out his tea. When Kunon and Reisha finally reach the Black Tower, the Grand Master of the Royal Sorcerers, Londemond Achtard, welcomes them. Kunon introduces himself as well, but this time, he's clearly very tense. After all, he thought Reisha's magic was impressive, but the Grand Master's magic is on a whole different level. The Grand Master mentions that he heard he has a water crest, and Kunon confirms it, saying that it's on his left shoulder. After taking a look, the Grand Master sees that it's a 2-star crest, and explains that there are 7 types of crests borne by sorcerers. There's fire, water, earth, wind, light, darkness, and foul, and each crest has 5 ranks. Kunon then assumes that his is water, second from the bottom. The Grand Master confirms it, saying that statistically, 2 stars are the most common. Reisha mentions that she's also a 2-star of the wind, so Kunon assumes that the Grandmaster isn't, saying that the density of his magical power is completely different. The Grandmaster admits that that's an interest description, and Kunon tells him that if the magical powers of Reisha and he are regular cheese, then his is like premium blue cheese, which is probably a 3-star. The Grandmaster tells him that he'll be mad if he calls him that again, and clarifies that he's actually a 4-star. Kunon is not that surprised, and mentions that it's his first time hearing about crests, so it's not really sinking in. After thinking about it for a bit, Kunon asks him if the difference in ranks influences the magic one can wield. The Grandmaster tells him that there's no clear categorization, and the only clear distinction they know of is the total amount of magical power. What matters is what he'll learn from now and how devoted he is. Once that's clear, the Grandmaster decides to move on, wanting to let the fun time begin already. Kunon has no idea what he's talking about, but soon enough, he's outside the Black Tower, surrounded by sorcerers. The Grandmaster lets him know that he's fascinated by him, so he wants to give him a test. Everyone is excited to see what kind of magic he uses, because he's the hero's Scar, and they heard he gave none other than Dario a hard time. Kunon wonders if this means a royal sorcerer can come be his teacher if he passes the test. Having this in mind, he asks the Grandmaster to begin, and a sorcerer named Victo steps forward. After the Grandmaster gives him the order, Victo uses Aori to create several small water balls around himself. Once he does that, the Grandmaster asks Kunon if he can conquer these water balls with his Aori. Kunon is taken by surprise by the concept of conquering magic with magic, because he never thought about that before. Jinni taught him that Aori is magic to produce and manipulate water, but it can also control water that's already there. Kunon has controlled water many times before, but manipulating the water another sorcerer created is completely different. The Grandmaster sees his hesitation and asks him if something's wrong. Kunon remains frozen in place because the Grandmaster nonchalantly gave him an assignment neither Genie nor him could come up with. Despite feeling unsure, Kunon decides to accept the new challenge and uses Aori to try to conquer Victo's magic. This is clearly not an easy task because he's never experienced water that resists before. Even though it's his first time, Kunon concentrates and makes a big effort trying to move Victo's water balls. After trying hard enough, 2 of the water balls start moving slightly, and the Grandmaster immediately asks him to stop, saying that that's enough. Kunon is left exhausted, feeling powerless after seeing what a real royal sorcerer is like. Even though he feels defeated, the Grandmaster praises him, saying that he's very good indeed. Victo agrees, because he didn't expect him to take any, and he even asks the Grandmaster if he can have Kunon. The other sorcerers immediately protest, and even Reisha disapproves, saying that he just got dumped by his girlfriend. Victo feels clearly offended, and he doesn't see what that has to do with this, but the other sorcerers tell him that he can't even look after himself. The Grandmaster simply laughs, mentioning that everyone seems to want Kunon now. Kunon asks him if that means he passed the test, but the Grandmaster asks him to try a few more things, because he'd like to experience his magic too. Kunon gladly agrees, and in no time, the Grandmaster is having the time of his life, bouncing on a giant water ball covered in a stretchy membrane. That's the Grandmaster of the Royal Sorcerers with a 4-star crest, so he feels like he's looking at something he shouldn't. The other sorcerers try to make the Grandmaster hurry, because they want to have their turn as well. The Grandmaster ignores their complaints and asks Kunon what this is, so Kunon explains that it's a super soft body Aori. He encased water in a super soft and super stretchy membrane, which helps absorb the shock of a fall. The Grandmaster finally comes down from it and tells him that he hasn't had this much fun with a magic test in years. Kunon informs him that if he increases the elasticity, he can jump so high that he can easily reach the 2nd floor of the castle. Everyone is excited with that idea, but the Grandmaster quickly asks him not to do that, because if he shows them any more magic, he won't be able to go home tonight. Kunon apologizes, saying that he has dinner with his fiancée, so he can't stay with them. The Grandmaster says that that's a shame, but Reisha leaves that aside and asks him if he can make other animals than cats. She also asks him if he can make humans, so Kunon decides to show her, using Aori to create a water doll with Iko's appearance. He clarifies that, just like animals, their movements are still imperfect. Victo assumes that that means, if his magic allows, it's possible to have human-like motion or make it move in ways humans can't. Kunon affirms that and mentions that he tried letting it fly as an experiment once, but it wasn't very pleasant to watch. Despite this, the Grandmaster and Reisha excitedly tell him that they want to see it. Kunon decides to please them, but one of the maids in the castle freaks out when she sees a body falling from the sky outside. Kunon does this over and over again, so a lot of the people in the castle complain. Dario scolds them once again, and this time, all the sorcerers, including the Grandmaster, have to apologize. All the sorcerers blame Victo, and Kunon feels bad that he got scolded twice today. The Grandmaster tells him that feeling down isn't going to change anything, so next time, they should discuss magic over lunch. Kunon asks him if that means he passed, and the Grandmaster tells him that there's no need to ask after how much fun he had. He will personally take care of assigning a sorcerer to be his teacher, so he doesn't have to worry anymore. Kunon immediately cheers, but he quickly asks if this will imply he supports a specific royal faction. Reisha reassures him and tells him that it won't, because power and status mean nothing to royal sorcerers. The Grandmaster then asks him if he has a future goal, and Kunon tells him that his goal is to create eyeballs with magic. The other sorcerers find that very impressive and intriguing, and and the Grand Master definitely approves. By the end of the day, Arson shows up, clearly not happy because he heard about his son's bad reputation twice today. Kunon tries to apologize, but Reisha quickly says that Kunon is not to blame since they all got carried away. Arson disagrees, saying that regardless of the situation, those who use magic should always be held accountable for their actions. Hurting someone because they're told to do so and killing people because they're ordered to do so are things that should never be allowed. Magic is power, so no matter who commands him, he must refuse if it can bring harm to others, because as long as he wields power, he is responsible. Kunon feels the weight of his father's words, so he takes responsibility and apologizes. Once Arson finally leaves, Reisha asks Kunon if he has to go get Mirika now. Kunon gets a little surprised and asks her if it really is that late, and Reisha lets him know that it's starting to get dark. That quickly makes him worry, because it'd be ungentlemanly of him to greet Mirika all sweaty and out of breath after running late. Seeing the problem, Reisha suggests combining their magic in that case, though he really doesn't understand at first. Soon enough, he creates a super soft body Aori again, and they both get on it, while Reisha reminds him that she has a wind crest, so if they fly this with her wind, they can get to Mirika's in no time. Kunon admits that it's an interesting experiment, though he doesn't think it's a good idea. After all, he promised himself that the first time he flies or floats alone with someone, it'd be with Princess Mirika. He's sure Reisha's fiancé will misunderstand as well, and he'll blame her for flying alone with a man. Reisha dismisses all his concerns and drags Kunon with her, saying that she doesn't have a fiancé. Kunon knows that he has no choice, so he allows her to make them float with her wind magic. In a matter of seconds, they're both shot into the sky at high speed, and that takes Kunon off guard. Reisha reassures him and decides to go even faster until they finally reach their destination. Kunon thanks her, but just then, the soft water ball instantly falls, though it fortunately absorbs the shock from the fall. Reisha apologizes, saying that she should have gradually decreased speed and altitude. Kunon reassures her this time, saying that now they know it can fly, and Reisha tells him that they need to experiment more. However, just as she says that, Dario appears in front of them, ready to scold them a third time today for being so reckless. Both Reisha and Kunon know what's coming, so they decide to apologize beforehand. In the meantime, Mirika focuses on making herself look presentable, wondering if Kunon will like the color of her outfit. Her personal maid reassures her, saying that he'll surely like it because it's her favorite color. Deep down, the maid wonders what kind of gentleman Kunon Gurion is to make the princess head over heels like this. Once she's ready, Mirika just starts nervously pacing around, unable to relax as she waits for Kunon. The maid, Laura, tries to ask her to calm down, but she doesn't blame her, since this is her first date outside the castle. When they let her know that someone has arrived, Mirika is suddenly calm and composed as always, wondering who it could be. Laura is taken off guard by her sudden shift in behavior, but she lets her know that Kunon has finally arrived. Not letting her finish, Mirika walks and almost runs just to go see Kunon. Once they finally meet, Kunon greets her with his charms, saying that the moon surely is beautiful tonight, even though he can't see it, because this is their first night out. He mentions that he was the princess at school, but he will escort her today, so he hopes she can give him her hand. Mirika is more than smitten by this, and she gladly lets him take her hand, while Laura quickly catches up to see who Kunon Gurion is. Once at the restaurant, Kunon makes a toast to the beautiful blue of her eyes and her dress. Laura is pleased to see his gentlemanly poise and behavior, and there's no wonder he stole Princess Mirika's heart. Mirika mentions the fact that he visited the Black Tower today, and Kunon confirms it, saying that he met her sister, Reisha, and every one of them was impressive there. The magical power of the Grand Master Blue Cheese, especially, was just like her full coiffure. Laura remains silent in the background, internally wondering if that's truly the right metaphor. Kunon excitedly mentions that he passed the test as well, and even though he hasn't heard who his magic teacher will be, he's sure they'll arrange it nicely, just like her sharp nails with beautiful colors and shapes. He also tells Mirika that he's listened to so many interesting stories, though her stories are of course more engaging. Laura starts getting a little weirded out by the way he speaks, but even though he's a bit strange, she recognizes that Mirika looks happy when she's with him, so it doesn't matter at all. Kunon's tone suddenly becomes more serious as he tells Mirika that right now, a dinner like this is the best he can do. However, when they get married, they'll spend time together like this every day, and he can't wait for the future where he'll be walking by her side to come. Laura immediately takes back what she said, realizing that Kunon is indeed quite an exceptional boy. Mirika keeps her composure and answers with a smile, but later that night in her room, she's screaming and kicking her feet in excitement. The next day, Iko asks Kunon for help with her chores, and this time, he uses a different spell called Arubu. This creates a bunch of soap bubbles, which Iko uses to get the dirt off the laundry very well. Kunon complains that she just called him for that, and mentions that he was in the middle of writing a report. Iko scolds him, saying that he's been shutting himself in his room since he returned from the castle. He clarifies that he wants to write it down before he forgets, but Iko tells him that going outside and spending time in the sun is one of his important jobs as a child, and it can affect his growth. Kunon just then realizes that women prefer tall men, and Iko admits that some do, but she likes him whether he's tall or short. That comment makes him happy, but Kunon doesn't return the compliment, saying that he doesn't want to be rude to Princess Mirika. He decides to listen to Iko's advice, though, and stays outside with her for a while. Kunon asks asks her if a letter ever came for him, and when Iko denies it, he confirms that they haven't decided who his teacher will be yet. Meanwhile, at the Black Tower, Victo prepares himself before entering an office, hoping he can come back safely. As soon as he opens the door, a huge pile of paperwork falls on the floor, and Zeonli Finroll emerges from all the scattered documents. He's clearly not happy that Victo dared to interfere with his precious sleeping time. This is exactly why Victo didn't want to come, but he lets him know that the Grand Master is calling for him. Soon after that, Kunon is happy to know that his new teacher has been assigned, and it's a sorcerer named Zeonli Finroll, the person his brother and mother were talking about. Iko gets even more excited than him, and asks him if he's talking about the Master Zeonli, who is rumored to be a magnificently gorgeous sorcerer. Kunon is surprised that she knows him, and Iko clarifies that every woman in Huglia does. She completely freaks out, wondering what to do, and saying that she needs to ask for a new maid outfit from his father, and she has to put on makeup. Kunon tries to speak, but his words don't get to her this time, and Iko continues freaking out, saying that she needs to do her nails, her hair, and lose weight. She leaves in panic before he can say a word, desperately wanting to put herself together. The next day, Reisha asks Mirika to go to Kunon's house, since a royal sorcerer must have a direct order from royalty to go outside, and guarding her should be a good enough reason. Reisha still complains, wondering why Zeonli got chosen, since she wanted to be Kunon's teacher too. As they walk through the halls of the castle, they casually run into the sisters, Everil and Ledalia. The two of them speak to Marika in a derogatory way, saying that they heard that her fiancé has an impressive reputation, unlike herself. Reisha keeps her composure and assures them that he's an excellent sorcerer, but that has nothing to do with them. The sisters take that as an offense, but Reisha doesn't waste time with them and asks them to get out of the way. Everil and Ledalia quickly leave, not without asking Reisha not to get cocky, because she was reprimanded by the knight 3 times. Reisha is surprised that they know that, but she asks Mirika not to worry, and goes back to complaining about Zeonli getting chosen as Kunon's teacher. Kunon patiently waits for them, wondering what his teacher is like, and Iko can't possibly contain her excitement. When the carriage finally arrives, he's clearly surprised to know that Mirika is here to visit him. He confesses that he mentally prepares himself every time he sees her, so seeing her unexpectedly, he's lost for words from being nervous. As Kunon showers her with compliments, as usual, Zeonli decides to get out of the carriage. Kunon asks Mirika if she changed her perfume, since it feels more mature and lovely now. Mirika clarifies that they tell her that she's too young for perfume, so she doesn't have any on, though she did change her soap. Kunon affirms that that must be it, since it has a mature yet floral scent, so he feels like a butterfly drawn to a flower right now. He immediately stops talking as soon as Zeonli steps out of the carriage, sensing his strong presence. Iko internally freaks out and screams, but she keeps a professional stance on the outside. Kunon is completely speechless and impressed, because Zeonli's magical power is really dense, and it's sticky as well, almost like honey. It's a totally different type of magical power than Grandmaster Blue Cheese, so he's more proficient in magic than any of the royal sorcerers that he met at the castle. Both Iko and Marika get a little worried when he doesn't say anything, completely entranced by Zeonli's presence. Kunon decides right there that he wants to look up to him as his master, so he quickly snaps out of it and finally introduces himself, asking Zeonli if he can call him Teacher Honey. Zeonli has no idea what he's talking about, so he refuses without a doubt and asks him to call him Master Zeonli. He makes it very clear that he hates brats, and he didn't accept the position of his magic teacher, so it's not like he wanted to be here. Kunon mentions that he must be here because of the ties of the rigid hierarchy in that case. Zeonli explains that the Grand Master told him there was an interesting brat he should meet, and that's why he's here. Dario decides to intervene, introducing himself as a knight from the Third Order, and mentioning that he's here to guard Mirika and Zeonli. Kunon thanks him for everything the other day, and Mirika is surprised that he knows him. Kunon clarifies that he doesn't personally know him, but he got scolded 3 times by him. Dario reminds him that he was just doing his job, and Zeonli just realizes what a strange kid Kunon is. Kunon asks Iko if Zeonli is the magnificently gorgeous sorcerer she mentioned, and she quickly confirms it, saying that he truly is perfect. Zeonli tells him that that's obvious, but Kunon clarifies that he can't see, so he doesn't understand what's cool, but he must be amazing for sure. For a moment, Zeonli thinks that he's kind of making fun of him, but Kunon assures him that's not the case at all, which only makes him think that he truly is a strange kid. Soon after that, they sit at a table in the garden, and Kunon thanks Mirika for bringing Zeonli here for him. Mirika dismisses it, saying that she wanted to see him too. Zeonli quickly stops them and reminds them that he's there as well, so they should stop flirting and have a fun discussion about magic with him. Kunon gladly accepts, but the smile on Zeonli's face makes Dario know that he wants to have fun picking on the kid. Zeonli starts by asking him if he knows compound spells, and Kunon tells him that spells are released from a magic circle drawn with magical power. Compound spells are created by dividing and rearranging magic circles, something he can easily do. Zeonli asks him how many sections he can handle now, and Kunon mentions that he can do 31, and he can go up to 32, but he fails sometimes. That takes Zeonli completely off guard, and he realizes that he's not too bad after all. He mentions that he can go up to 50 sections, and that alone is enough to greatly impress Kunon. Despite his surprise, Zeonli clarifies that he'd like to know how he got past the 20-section hurdle. Kunon explains that he layered crests, and he got there on his own by using a bunch of little tricks. Little tricks apparently gives a bad impression though, so he decides to call them alterations. Zeonli wasn't expecting something like that, and he soon realizes why Victo and Ratio were so mad at him because he got chosen as Kunon's teacher. They wanted to be his masters as well, and they didn't want him to be his teacher when he didn't even bother to meet him when he came to the Black Tower. Zeonli tried to tell them that it's not like he wanted to be his teacher, since the Grand Master simply told him that Kunon is interesting. Victo assured him that Kunon is not just interesting, and an excellent student like him won't come around too often. Ratio tried to tell him about all the things he did during his visit, but Zeonli truly didn't understand until now. Now he can see why they were so invested in getting him, because he is an exceptional talent indeed. Zeonli asks him to show him what he can do, but Kunon asks him to show him how to do 50 sections first. Zeonli tells him that it's pointless to teach it to someone who can't do it, and he's not going to waste his time, so he must prove what he can do and ask for instruction fair and square by sucking up to him. Marika remains silent because she's sure that Kunon would never do that. However, Kunon accepts without hesitation, telling Zeonli how cool he is and saying that he wants him to teach him because he'd love to see how awesome he is. Marika realizes that she spoke too soon, and Kunon continues showering Zeonli with praise, saying that sucking up to him isn't a problem if it means he can learn how to do 50 sections. Zeonli clearly wasn't expecting him to comply like that, and it kind of creeps him out. He clarifies that he has many things to say to him, but he starts by saying that he doesn't want him to call him master because he hasn't acknowledged him yet. Zeonli tells him that he will show him how awesome he is though, with his 3-star crest of Earth. Without wasting any time, he creates a great earth wall and asks Kunon to try to destroy it with magic. Otherwise, that's it for him. Zeonli also mentions that he heard his waterbed is popular, so he wants to see it for himself. Kunon decides to show him and uses Aori to create a squishy waterbed, and Zeonli tells him that he'll observe from there. As soon as he touches the waterbed, Zeonli immediately feels the softness of a pile of down feathers. And it's not just soft, it's warm and smells really nice. He falls asleep over it without even realizing, which clearly surprises Dario, but Iko explains that it's something that can't be helped. Kunon focuses on his task and touches the earth wall Zeonli created, which is really hard and yet smooth to the touch. It's very simple at first glance, but the density of magical power is incredible, and it's strong enough to sustain the hardness over time. Genie told him that magic is a crest, and a crest means a magic circle. The caster creates various spells by rearranging different magic circles, and those magic circles become the base of each spell. Compound magic refers to the number of times the base magic circle has been divided and reconstructed, and it's the essence of magic. This number shows the level of magic and alterations. When he observes the wall up close, Kunon realizes that it's a crystal of compound magic with over 40 sections. That's really impressive to him, because he doesn't know how someone can increase the sections this much. Before even trying anything, he decides to have a chat with Marika, wanting to wait until Zeonli wakes up. After a while, Zeonli abruptly wakes up and falls off the waterbed, and Dario lets him know that he was asleep for about 2 hours. When he sees Kunon calmly having some tea with Marika, Zeonli mentions that he looks awfully comfortable and assumes that he just gave up. Kunon denies it and asks him if he's ready for him to break the wall. Zeonli gladly asks him to try, and Kunon decides to use Rubu, the spell he used to help Iko with the laundry. A bunch of bubbles surround the wall, and Kunon explains that a dirt wall becomes extremely fragile when it absorbs water beyond its capacity. He could tell right away because the texture was very similar to that of the hard bread meant for breaking teeth. Zeonli admits that he got it more or less right except for the purpose of hard bread. He asks him why he used Rubu though, because he knows that his specialty is Aori. As the dirt wall completely crumbles apart, Kunon confidently explains that he just thought this would be easier. Zeonli then understands that rather than using force, he saw the wall as dirt and chose to wash it away. There are spells that are compatible with certain situations and subjects, and a sorcerer's job is to see through it. Kunon gladly takes that as a compliment and asks him if that means he can be his student now. Zeonli quickly tells him that he doesn't get to decide that, but just then, he informs him that, starting today, he is a student of Zeonli Finral. That means he's the luckiest kid in the world, because he is going to be his master. Kunon takes Mirika's hand and admits that he's right, because he found his master, and Princess Mirika is by his side. He's truly the luckiest, and if he wished for any more, he would surely get a divine punishment. Mirika is smitten by his words, but Zeonli asks them to cut it off once again, and reminds Kunon that his master comes before his fiancée. Now that he's his student, there's a ton of things for him to do, and he has a million things to teach him, so he'll help with his experiments. Mirika tries to protest, but Zeonli asks her what she will do, because Kunon is his student now, which means he'll improve a lot and move up in the world. Soon, women will swarm around him to fight over him, and she should understand what that means. Mirika surely understands, because Kunon has grown so much to become a student of a royal sorcerer, but she's still a princess of low status. If she doesn't do something, there is no future where Kunon and she can be together. Kunon can feel the slight trembling of her hands, so he immediately asks Zeonli not to be mean to Mirika. Zeonli clarifies that he's actually rooting for her, but Kunon calls him out and says that he actually likes being mean to girls, and he's probably the type to realize it too late. He's the type to be mean to a girl he likes and have her stolen from under his nose for sure, because he's the difficult, awkward type who can't be kind to girls. All of his comments clearly strike a nerve on Zeonli, who tries to contain his anger and asks him to stop. That night, however, Mirika is still thinking about Zeonli's words, and she knows that she has to do something about it and that she has to change somehow.